Alright, so this is a suggestion via Patreon. The name of the video is Trapped for 60 Hours at the Bottom of the Ocean. Guys, I have so many concerns just based off of the title. But let's go and check it out, guys. Really quickly, before we even jump into it, I would say my main concern would probably be how did he do it? I'm guessing there must have been some type of pocket of air he was caught in. But 60 hours, I'll be honest, guys, I don't think that he should be alive right now. Mainly based off of, if it is a pocket of air underneath the water, he has, at whatever depth he was in, I'm guessing it's probably not thousands of feet or meters, guys. It's probably hundreds, if anything, if he survived. I'm thinking decompression sickness, if they're able to actually bring him back to the surface, mainly based off of the CO2 and the nitrogen that's being basically pumped into his body every time he exhales, guys. Think about that for a second. So carbon dioxide toxicity, decompression sickness, issues with overall nitrogen. What's interesting about if you're ever trapped in the bottom of any type of like ocean or seafaring vessel, it's not the lack of oxygen that's going to end you, bro. It's your own like exhaled CO2. That's going to finish you off, bro. Right? You yourself, every time you breathe, that's the end of you, basically. Slowly. But all right, let's see where this takes us, guys.
Harrison Oken was working as a cook on a tugboat called Jackson 4. It had set off from the coast of Nigeria and was working in the icy waters of the Atlantic Ocean.
Okay.
The job of a tugboat is to tow other seacraft across the ocean to their destination because they can't maneuver over the waters on their own. In Oken's case, his tugboat was one of 3 crafts set out to bring an oil rig back to land.
Okay.
Far out into the deep waves of the Atlantic Ocean, it's not unusual to hit rocky waters or a bit of stormy weather. It's part and parcel of working on a boat out at sea, sometimes for many weeks. Some days you will drift along with relative ease, and on others you feel truly at the mercy of the elements. So when this particular storm hit in May 2013, Oken and his crew had no idea just how much destruction it was going to wreak. That day, Oken awoke in the early hours of the morning and headed to the bathroom to freshen up. It was when he was in the bathroom.
He probably went to urinate. I don't know about freshen up, but all right.
That happened. Something hit the tugboat, a large wave, a gust of wind, who knows? But it was the vessel's final blow.
I'm going to go ahead and probably say more so a large wave than a gust of wind. I don't think the wind itself could knock over a tugboat. I think the wind was kind of pushing the ocean, and then probably a combination of things.
He barely had time to think before the icy waters began sucking the tugboat into its depths. He couldn't see anything, but he knew that the ship was in serious trouble.
What about hypothermia?
Tried to scramble out of the bathroom and towards his fellow crew members.
Well, did he make it for real?
But nothing could prepare him for what he would see next.
Well, I guess the force of the wave. Did he make it alive? I think that's probably a better question. Did he make it up alive? That's the severity, because I'm sure 60 hours, I'm gonna be honest, I don't think he could have went much longer, or he may have actually passed the threshold of carbon dioxide toxicity, guys. I think it's like 55 or so hours, guys, right? So he was basically on his last couple of moments, guys, if he was caught or found at that time. But also, he would need to kind of be rushed to the surface to get regular air again. But that couldn't happen either. You understand? Because of the decompression sickness. He'd have to go up very, very slowly, and I'm not sure he had that time. Unless maybe a diver could give him like one of the like a mask or something like that, guys, and a canister of oxygen, and a way to obviously expel the CO2 into the water rather than into his body again. But still, his tissue and blood are going to be so nitrogen rich that this is such an interesting thing, guys.
His rocking the boat meant that he couldn't get to the emergency exit hatch, but he could see some of his colleagues inching closer to it. Okay. As everyone attempted to clamber their way to the exit hatch, a huge swell of water burst into the ship and swept through it. He could only watch in horror as 3 of his colleagues were sucked out into the black depths. It's hard to imagine the force of the waves that were sucking this once powerful tugboat deep into the ocean.
How
He had
deep
no
was
time
he?
to grieve for what he had just seen as he was thrown about the ship as it continued to plummet.
Wow.
He turned away from the exit hatch and was immediately swept up by another violent wave. But instead of being pulled out to sea, he was thrust down another of the ship's passageways. In the darkness, he had no idea where he was being pulled or what he would find there.
Pure luck, guys.
Then,
Pure
with a
luck.
deafening crash, the staggering descent of the ship stopped as suddenly as it had started. He slowly realized that he had been swept by the surging water into another toilet, near to one of the other cabins. Water continued to surge and pummel the tugboat on the outside, but the inside seemed to have stopped moving.
Okay.
He had no idea what was happening, but he realized one thing with
Okay, so he was found alive.
astonishment.
This has to be a real image.
He was still breathing. He couldn't understand it. Was he really at the bottom of the ocean? What had happened? Where were his colleagues? Were they all right? Had anyone survived, or were some of them trapped like him? The tugboat had overturned completely and was now sitting upside down at the bottom of the seabed. Incredibly, he seemed to be in some sort of small air pocket, preserving a precious space where he could still breathe. He realized that he was alive, and he could still breathe in this small air pocket, but he wasn't sure what to do next. He tried calling out for his colleagues, peering into the darkness for any sign of them, but there was nothing. Stuck in the tiny toilet, with water slowly but steadily trickling in, he looked around for things to climb onto to keep his head out of the water. He found an overturned wash basin and clung to that to propel himself a little higher. But this wouldn't last. He needed to find something else to climb on, and fast. As terrifying as it was, he had to leave his tiny toilet and see if there was anything else nearby that he could use to build height. He finally built up the courage to open the door and managed to swim into the adjacent cabin. From there, he was able to pull off parts of the wall paneling. He piled up the paneling to create a sort of makeshift raft and managed to lift himself further out of the icy water. There was nothing else to do now but wait and pray for a miracle. There was another reason that he needed to stay still after building this raft.
Go ahead.
Not just out of fear of dislodging another great swell of ocean water, but to preserve the oxygen in his own body. Any form of
I can
exertion
imagine.
causes you to breathe more heavily, and he was aware of the limited oxygen in his tiny air pocket.
Wow.
He stayed as still as possible and tried to regulate his breathing. But even this wouldn't be helpful for much longer. The truth is that even if he had remained completely still and meticulously rationed his breathing, oxygen would eventually become too scarce.
Right.
At these sorts of depths in the ocean, the oxygen levels are incredibly low and are quickly overtaken by the nitrogen levels. Oaken did everything he could to cling to life.
Yeah, that's my biggest fear. Seriously, like all of what he just said, absolutely my biggest fear with regards to this story here. I'm glad that I'm guessing if we're hearing the story, he probably survived this and made it to the top, guys. Absolutely, he made it out. But my only other concern would be probably, I'm glad that he understood instantly to get like his torso, as much of it out of the water as humanly possible. I think that's probably saved his life, right? The temperature of the water is probably freezing. I understand, your legs are going to be a little bit cold, right? But you can deal with that more so than your actual torso, getting below freezing temperatures or close to it consistently and wet, right? All of what he did by climbing out, as well as he could, right, is the reason why he's alive, guys.
Lost and alone in the darkness, freezing cold, and with the water levels slowly rising. He had no food, no water, but he did manage to find a small bottle of Coke. But he had more to worry about than the
Calories,
lack
sugar.
of food or water. Already incredibly uncomfortable from the freezing salty water and struggling without anything to eat or drink, something else started to affect him.
Okay.
After being in the harsh salt water for a long time,
Right.
his skin began to peel off in painful flakes.
Oh, yeah.
Even though things seemed utterly
Yeah.
hopeless,
Didn't think
the
of that.
devout Christian clung to his hope in God,
Ooh.
praying again and again that he be saved. It was clear that for Oaken to survive, he would truly need some kind of miracle.
And it was burning, too. When the skin was being probably, unfortunately, peeling off, guys, it was burning.
Fortunately, this was something that he believed was completely possible, even in the darkest of times. As well as his faith in God, Oaken kept himself sane with thoughts of his life and family back home. Thinking of them gave him renewed strength to keep fighting and believe that a miraculous rescue could be just around the corner. 60 hours had now passed since the tugboat had crashed into the seabed, and he was still clinging to life, way down there at the bottom of the ocean. Suddenly, he thought he heard a faint hammering on the deck. Was this all in his mind? Or was salvation truly at hand? Oaken's desperate hope was true, in a manner of speaking. There was indeed a search team of divers circling the wreck of the tugboat. But they were not there to look for survivors. It was so impossible for anyone to possibly survive down in these depths that the search team had merely been sent to recover the bodies. Dutch company DCN Diving had already found 4 bodies and was certainly not looking for survivors. The team went deeper into the murky boat, using their headlamps to shine light into the dark water. As the divers swept through the corridors, Oaken could see the light from one of their head torches passing him. Oaken was desperate to attract his attention, but he was so exhausted he could barely lift his arms. Miraculously, for some unknown reason, the diver returned to the same spot. Oaken was more terrified now than ever
The luckiest man in history.
before. He knew he had to muster all his strength and not let this moment go by.
Right.
Weak from days without food or water, Oaken had to use the last of his remaining energy to swim towards the diver. He still could not get his attention, so he reached out and tapped him on the back of the neck.
How?
The video footage from the search team's cameras shows the incredible events that happened next.
Okay.
Once the diver spotted Oaken's hand reaching out, he turned to his microphone,
It's moving.
reporting to the rescue ship above. "Corpse, corpse, corpse," he called.
But it's moving.
But then he realized how very wrong he was.
Right.
As the diver approached to touch the dead hand, it touched him back. You can hear the amazed reaction of the rescue team in the live video footage. "He's alive? He's alive!" they exclaimed in shock.
He's alive! He's alive!
When the search team realized they had discovered a survivor, they were overjoyed at this unprecedented miracle. It was an
He's been
astonishing
through it,
result
guys.
for everyone, not just because they
Obviously.
completely hadn't expected it, but because it truly was impossible that someone could survive in
Right.
those conditions. Even though he had now been discovered, there was still a way to go before he could be safe. The rescue team was worried that the excitement of being rescued would cause him to panic and hyperventilate.
Yeah, that cannot
They
happen.
weren't just concerned about his feelings, but
Right.
because he had been in such a nitrogen-high environment,
Yeah,
it was
instant heart
likely that
attack.
he had absorbed potentially lethal amounts.
Oh, he have. He did. He did. 100%.
Raising your heart rate while in this state is incredibly dangerous and can be fatal. So for the rescue team, keeping Oaken calm was literally a matter of life or death. Fortunately, the rescue team, both under the water and above in the search panel, were incredible at keeping Oaken calm and positive and talking him through the rescue process. The diver's video footage is incredibly emotional, showing the team leader talking calmly and kindly to Oaken, putting him at ease.
Right.
Although he had been rescued, it wasn't as straightforward as simply taking him back up to the surface.
Right.
Having spent so much time in the pressurized container, his heart had slowly filled with gas, meaning that it was no longer able to cope with the air conditions above the water. The return of Oaken to the surface and the outside world had to be done in several separate careful stages. First, the rescue team strapped him into diving equipment, including a mask to help him breathe underwater. Then they led him through the water into a diving bell. The diving bell returned him to the surface, but he had to go immediately into a decompression chamber.
Right.
Oken spent 2 days in the chamber, where his heart eventually returned to normal levels.
It's a good
Soon
story.
enough,
Guys.
the miraculous survival and rescue story of Harrison Oken spread around the world. Readers and experts all over the world were amazed and moved by the miracle, which had never happened before. Some hypothesized that it was the chemical makeup of the water that he was partially submerged in. The water could have helped absorb the otherwise potentially dangerous levels of nitrogen and carbon dioxide that arise in a concealed space over a long period of time.
Plausible.
Oken has spoken openly about the strength he found in his religious faith while trapped in the depths of the ocean. In dire straits with no sign of rescue, no sustenance, and danger and horrors all around him, it is amazing that he kept his belief throughout it all. Although Oken swore never again to go near the ocean, he became a certified commercial diver in 2015. He got his diploma from the rescue diver who found him at the bottom of the ocean.
I love it. We
would like to thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please press the like button. Consider subscribing.
Guys, so I can definitely tell you right now, I've never heard anything like this in terms of luck. Easily the luckiest human to exist, period. Oh man, I would never want to be in his situation, but I'm definitely glad that he made it. I'm also glad that the person narrating also had this kind of similar concerns in terms of exactly what his body was going through underneath there, because that was extremely important to at least divulge, right? It's extremely important here, in this instance here. I don't know how he made it. You know, if you want to attribute faith to it, you can do that, right? No problems. I mean, I'm glad that something was at least able to kind of ground him to make him last many hours longer than his body should have, guys. Just to be honest, I just don't know how you're pushing past like the lethality of carbon dioxide toxicity. Like that's generally that's a sentence you're not going to come back from. But somehow, wow. Wow, guys. All right. Luckiest man to ever live, no doubt. Listen, let me know in the comments the next thing I should be checking out, subject-wise, guys. And I will. And you guys all have an absolutely amazing day and enjoy your day thoroughly.